Hi everyone, comedian Frankie Boyle is back on the BBC, on the BBC iPlayer for his second series of the programme New World Order, which talks about politics and the news. And obviously this is in the week where previously, or the week previously, 60 Palestinians were murdered in Gaza by sniper fire from Israel. I've covered it on my channel. I think it's terrible. I think it's a human rights violation, and obviously it's big news. Now, I expected Frankie Boyle to talk about this massively on his show, and he's come under a lot of criticism because other than a segment I'm about to show you, he didn't talk about it at all. He talked about something else. I'll come to that later. He's faced a lot of criticism. So has another comedian who appeared on that show, Baddiel, who, by the way, I also like. I think when I was growing up, I used to watch Newman and Baddiel, or was it Newman and Baddiel? It was very funny, but it was very childish. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but anyway, I like the comedians that are on this show. So they've both come under a lot of criticism for reasons I'll explain as we go through the video. I've got to be very careful of my wording here because it's a hot potato of a topic. So this is a segment of the opening monologue of the show when Frankie Boyle does bring up the subject of Gaza. Take a look.
Israel this week shot dead 58 Palestinian protesters, wounded another 2,000 people in what the British media disgracefully described as clashes. It's not clashes. If one side has sniper rifles and the other side has a few catapults and slingshots, you're basically murdering the Ewoks.
Okay, so he's brought up, that's a funny joke actually about the Ewoks, or at least I thought it was. He's brought that up in his opening monologue and I thought, great, okay, so wonderful. He's brought it up, obviously they're going to talk about it on the show. He didn't. In fact, that was the last time Gaza was mentioned on the show. That one segment, which was 15, 20 seconds long, that was it. Wasn't talked about again at all. Instead, the first topic of the conversation was this, and this segment goes on for 11 minutes and 36 seconds, I think they talk about this. Have a guess what the subject is.
First up, in 4 years' time, Labour will lose Britain's last ever general election.
You know where this is going to go. You just know. It's the BBC. You know where this is going to go.
I doubt the Labour Party, as it's led now, is even really left-wing. It's probably more a party of the centre-left, opposing as much as anything its own MPs, who are centre-right. It's been frustrating to see how they've handled questions of anti-Semitism, because if you're going to become a government, and particularly a socialist government, you're going to have to answer a lot of questions. You'd hope that one of the simpler questions might be, do you hate Jews?
Surprise. Then he brings on his first guest, which is David Baddiel. And if you follow David Baddiel on Twitter like I do, he's always talking about anti-Semitism. You know that this is what the 11-minute and 36-second segment is going to be about. And sure enough, that's all they talk about for the next 11 minutes and 36 seconds. That's all they talk about. I just want to show you the first clip just to show you how bad this is. Take a look.
Thanks for coming, man. Have you been following Labour's hatred of Jews?
I have. Jeremy Corbyn does do a thing of saying always, you know, it's terrible, anti-Semitism and other racisms. And I wonder why he does that. Because if you go to an oncologist, you don't really want him to say, well, I'm going to cure cancer and shingles, don't worry, it's going to be all sorted out. Just stick to the fucking cancer, I think. So he always says that, though, and that is a problem, I think. Corbyn can't quite bring himself to say, I'm just bothered about Jews.
Does he? Does he really? Does he always say other racisms? Does he really, David? Is that the case?
Zio is a vile epithet that follows in a long line of earlier such terms that have no place whatsoever in our party. Nor should anyone indulge in the kind of stereotyping that can cause such hurt and harm. To assume that a Jewish friend or fellow member is wealthy, part of some kind of financial or media conspiracy, or takes a particular position on politics in general, or on Israel and on Palestine in particular, is just wrong. Our Jewish friends are no more responsible for the actions of Israel or the Netanyahu government than our Muslim friends are for those various self-styled Islamic states or organisations.
There you go. So he doesn't always bring it up. Not always. He does a lot. He does mention other racisms a lot when he's talking about anti-Semitism, when he's attacked constantly on it. But he's alluding a lot of the time, he puts racism in there because he's alluding to racism within the Tory party. I'll get back to that in a bit, but this is the next thing that Frankie Boyle said to David in this segment.
I think that's absolutely the problem. It's not just that they're bad at dealing with this, which they are, but also that it makes you think they're sort of bad at dealing with things that come up. And if you're going to sell yourself as a radical alternative, you've got to present yourself as good as dealing with things, even difficult things.
And I think being passionate about it.
He does say there's no room in the Labour Party for anti-Semites, and that might be because it's full.
Okay, the joke from David the other side, which I've heard before, by the way, that's not an original joke, I don't think. Frankie Boyle's comment there is a fair one on Jeremy Corbyn. I say this all the time. He should trust in his convictions more. He's watering down what he thinks to try and placate the right-wing Blairites in his party, who are followed by people like David Baddiel. These are centrists. They're not. Labour Party should be a left-wing party, as Frankie rightly says there. But it's being watered down. The message is being watered down, and it's starting to piss people like me off. For instance, in the Labour Party manifesto, they said that I'm not sure whether it was in the manifesto actually, but I know that they say, right, okay, we should make marijuana available as a medical substance. It's like, well, yeah, okay, great, that's a good step, but it's a half-assed step. It should be legal totally. Nobody's ever died from marijuana use. Alcohol and tobacco, on the other hand, they kill people all the time, and they're legal. Tax it, regulate it. Don't just come out with a half-assed measure to say, oh, we're gonna legalise it for medical use, because it's half-assed. That's what it's a half-assed thing, and you're watering down what you actually really believe to try and placate some of these centrists in your party and the followers. Bollocks to them. It's a left-wing party. That's where it should be. So Frankie's criticism there is correct. The segment goes on.
The quotas,
they've got enough already.
But Jeremy Corbyn is as North London as fair trade cocaine. Like, when did since when is he anti-Semitic?
Who knows if Jeremy himself is anti-Semitic? I don't think he probably is. What I think is he just comes from a place.
He's been connected and in the same place, like lots of politicians, with people who definitely are anti-Semitic. And I think because of Israel-Palestine, which is something that Jeremy Corbyn really, really heartily believes in, he has been in a room with lots of people who are very anti-Israel, and some of those people are racist against Jewish people.
When they do polling to find out whether or not people are anti-Semitic, they literally put these statements to them saying, do you believe that Jews run the world? And it's statements like that that are indicative of anti-Semitism.
Yes, 29% of people who voted for Corbyn in the Labour Party think the world is controlled by a secret global elite. And that global elite are Jews.
Okay, so now he's cherry-picking stats. And this is something that I hear all the time. Oh, if you think the global elite are controlling the world, if you think the Rothschilds are cloning the world, then you're anti-Semite. It's as far as I'm concerned, this is rubbish. Now, I'm not saying that some people who believe in Rothschilds running the world and Jewish people running the world are anti-Semitic, because some of them are, but not all of them do. There is there is a lot of data to back up that Jewish people by far operate at a higher level in society than other races and other religions. There's a lot of data to back it up. So just coming out and saying, oh, if you believe in that conspiracy, then you're automatically an anti-Semite, is just bollocks. Here's a tweet he made, David Baddiel, quite recently. Here's Neil YD saying that calling out anti-Semitism is a crock of shit, whilst being a stone-cold anti-Semite. What did he say? He said, I'm fed up with it, this shit on Corbyn and anti-Semitism with the BBC. And as for the David and conspiracies, have you not heard of the Rothschild family? E.g., why is a Rothschild Marcus Agius on the BBC board? Now, that's a fair question. That doesn't automatically mean that guy, Neil Devine, is an anti-Semite. Doesn't. It's akin to saying, it's akin to saying that anybody who thinks that O.J. Simpson should be in jail for the rest of his life for the murder of his ex-wife is racist. It's just the two things. They always merge these things, people do, and it really does piss me off. Now, it carries on, but before I want to get to that, he did mention about that 29%, he's cherry-picking stacks. This is from Channel 4. This is from, I think, a year or two ago. Beware cherry-pick stats on Labour anti-Semitism. Pockets of anti-Semitism. This is a YouGov poll of British adults. You can see there, 32% of people who were answering this questionnaire that they give them gave somewhat of an anti-Semitic statement. And I assume that thinking that the global elite is one of those questions that David is talking about there. But look at that. Two above it. Conservatives were 40%. They actually answered the questions or with anti-Semitic statements more than people who supported UKIP. You can't cherry pick stats like that to fit your narrative. It's wrong. This article in Channel 4, which was excellent, by the way, actually says, how do British Jews people perceive anti-Semitism in the parties? You can see there, overwhelmingly, they think Labour is anti-Semitic, where the data doesn't actually back that up. So which section of society is wrong on that issue, David? Which section? It's statements like that are muddying the waters and making it harder to have a conversation about Israel. And we'll get to that later. It goes on.
It's just so confusing because I always understood Labour to be the non-racist party.
Yes.
And it's very off-brand for them.
But that's the off-brand thing is that's why a lot of left-wing people refuse to see it and why it's complicated to talk about anti-Semitism and other racisms, because it's almost saying it's not really a proper racism. So all Jews will be called, like any racist will say they're vermin or they're thieving or they're lying. They'll also get this one specific thing that most other races don't get, which is we are also secretly controlling the global agenda and, of course, moneyed and privileged. So it's a high and low status by which we get attacked. And that is why the left feel that it's kind of okay. Also, when we're talking about anti-Semitism on the left, obviously it exists incredibly on the right as well.
And then there was this complication because there were people that felt like this issue was being used as an excuse by some people to be anti-Labour.
Okay, right. You might have missed something there, and I did the first time I watched it. And it was only when I was compiling this video and knowing what I know now a few days later, because when I saw that programme, I wanted to immediately come out and do a video, but I thought to myself, hold on a minute, this is the BBC, okay? I'm going to need to examine the crap out of this because I know how surreptitious they do things. Let me just show you that again, because David brings up that there is racism in the Conservative Party as well. Just let me isolate that clip. Have a watch.
Also, when we're talking about anti-Semitism on the left, obviously it exists incredibly on the right as well.
And then there was this complication.
Did you see that? Did you see what the BBC have done there? Take a look again.
Also, when we're talking about anti-Semitism on the left, obviously it exists incredibly on the right as well.
And then there was this
So David's been fair there, and he said, obviously, anti-Semitism is on the left, but it's incredibly on the right as well. And he takes a breath, and it cuts, and all of a sudden Sarah Pascoe is speaking. They have edited out the criticism that David was obviously going to do there about the anti-Semitism and racism on the right, on the Conservative Party. They've edited that part out. I am sure that he was going to go on and say something there about the Conservative Party. Now, if he didn't, and I'm wrong, I apologise, but it looks to me like they have cut the bit out where he criticised the Conservatives. I would love to know if that's the case, because if that's the case, that is a clear case of bias. Clear. There is a problem in the Conservative Party about with racism and anti-Semitism. Just today, Nadine Dorries condemned for suggesting British women of colour shouldn't criticise royal wedding, appreciate the country you benefit from. That was just today, and Nadine Dorries is actually one of my more likeable, I think, Conservatives. Boris Johnson has time and time again had to apologise for racism, where he's called young black children pickaninnies, and he does it. He's done it several times, at least half a dozen occasions, I would say. There are multiple times where the Toryism have had a racism problem, but that doesn't seem to be in the news. They talk about it and then they move on. How long has this anti-Semitism smear against Jeremy Corbyn gone on now? It's been years. It's ever since he took control of the Tory party, where the figures and the statistics actually show that they're less racist than the Conservatives. So why is that? A point that Owen Jones brilliantly brought up on the BBC.
You know what's happening. You know what that front page splash is all about. I'll give you an example. That Sunday Times splash, because you were leading on it the last hour. I did watch, by the way. And
I'm not disputing what may have been done earlier. What I'm saying to you is, isn't the story of the Sunday Times... Presumably, if the Sunday Times had found any evidence that linked an individual to it, they would have gone on that.
No,
they didn't find that.
What they did is went on Facebook groups with tens of thousands of members, with hundreds of thousands of posts, millions probably of comments cumulatively, found despicable racist and anti-Semitic comments, then tried to link that to the fact that there were people within the leader's office who are the most committed anti-racists I've probably ever met. Look, I've got an example here, just to show how these splashes work. This so-called journalism, OK? Where's your camera? This is Conservatives Against the EU. It's a Facebook group. It is full of the most despicable racism I've ever seen.
Presumably the Conservative Party would reject it,
About Gina Miller, for example, F off you foreigner, telling them to go back to your homeland.
Fine.
The most despicable racism. You're not making that. Why isn't that? Why is that?
Because presumably Labour is the story at the moment, but why is they not able to change the narrative?
That's the point, isn't it?
What do you think?
Well done, Owen Jones. I've showed that clip before. I love seeing it. I love seeing... especially somebody from The Guardian. He's one of the few people at The Guardian I really do respect. You all by now know my views on that other paper. But it's good to see people pushing back, especially on the establishment media. Now, there's a scandal that the Conservatives have been in recently that's been racist. And they do bring this up in the next segment of this show. And it's about Windrush. Take a look what they say.
Then they became a thing of, stop talking about this, we need to get elected first.
Yeah.
Let's not address this issue. And that is really problematic in itself.
Yeah, some people think, and they're probably right, this is being used to sort of smear the Labour Party and Corbyn. But you know what? Anything bad that happens to a political party will be used by people to beat that political party. Windrush was being used very successfully by the Labour Party to say that the Tories have fucked up.
Yeah.
Right? That's good, but it doesn't mean it's not true.
Yeah.
And no one was saying, oh, it's not real. The racism isn't real about Windrush.
So David's right there. You know, whatever happens, it's going to be used. But that's not what people who support Jeremy Corbyn complain about. It's fine to use it. What's not fine is for them to go on the BBC, almost every programme now, they're bringing it up. How many times has Corbyn been smeared this year with things that are just untrue? What about that Czech spy that they all ran on it? They all ran on it. And he brings up the Windrush scandal there. And yes, they were attacked on it. But is it still in the news today? Are the BBC still talking about it in almost every programme? No, of course they're not. They're back onto the anti-Semitism. A week in which Gazans, Palestinians in Gaza, were slaughtered. Slaughtered. The Windrush scandal, for those in America that don't understand, the Windrush was, it's a ship that actually shipped over some West Indians and some descendants of the people that came over from the West Indies on that ship and ships like it. They're being ostracised in society, shall we say, by a policy that Theresa May implemented when she was Home Secretary. And I forget what she called it now. Yeah, that was it. A hostile environment. She implemented that policy, a hostile environment, where they went after these people who had lived all their lives in the UK, paid taxes, paid into the NHS, had jobs, bought houses, got businesses. And they were attacked as being not citizens and were threatened with deportation. Now, Amber Rudd, who became Home Secretary a while back, when Theresa May obviously went on to be Prime Minister, she faced criticism because the scandal, she said, oh, well, there were never any numbers. When she was asked, were there any figures that you had to hit? And she said, no. And then it comes out they were. And she said, oh, I wasn't aware of them. And then it comes out that there's emails to prove that she was aware of them. And then she said, oh, well, okay, I lied about that. I've been caught out lying. I misinformed people. I'll resign. And then Sajid Javid come in and said, oh, no. Nobody was actually deported. And then it turns out 65 people were really deported. And the thing that pissed me off about that the most is the person who put this policy in place of the hostile environment is still in power. Nobody has been sacked for installing that horrific piece of legislation. Amber Rudd, well, she was thrown under the bus as far as I'm concerned. Now, I want to defend Frankie Boyle here, because I've left this to the very end, because I didn't realise this until quite recently. And it's one of the reasons why I held off from doing this video for a day or two until all the facts came out. Because as Frankie says here, there were, of course, various jokes in this week's New World Order monologue about the situation in Gaza and about Israel being an apartheid state, edited out for reasons nobody has yet explained to me, despite assurances to the contrary. So, not only, as I've showed you there, is it quite probable that they've edited out the criticism that David Baddiel gave the Conservatives, but they've also edited out the jokes that I assume are going to be very harsh that Frankie Boyle did at the beginning in his monologue, and just left the one in about the Ewoks, which is obviously the least, I would say, is going to be the least harsh joke that he's made. And the annoying thing about this is, what did Frankie Boyle expect? This is the BBC. This is an interview that he did, I think it was 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. This is just a clip of an interview and him talking about the BBC. Take a look at what he said.
So I did a joke about Israel's last assault on Gaza. I did 2 jokes on a show called Political Animal. I was censured by the BBC Trust, and they called the jokes anti-Semitic, right, which they weren't. And I wrote a response. Clarkson tells a nursery rhyme that ends in the word, and the controller of BBC One is coming out to defend him and say he's not a racist. And the reason is, there's no content to what he's saying, so it can be defended. If you want to defend what I'm saying, you've got to actually talk about the situation in Gaza.
So he obviously knows that the BBC do this. He knows that the BBC have an Israeli bias. It's not the first time he said that either, or not the only time he said that. In 2013, he did this interview with RT. Listen to this.
Yeah, well,
you've got a situation really where if you look at certain things being reported by the BBC, so you look at something like Israel-Palestine or something, you can see a great deal of what would seem to be institutional bias there. And it's a great institution in some other ways. I mean, compared to television in America, I think it offers a lot more than you can get in any commercial channel in America. But at the same time, you've got to recognise the role it plays in Britain in propaganda. You know?
Well, when we were doing a show for BBC World News called The Oracle with Max Kaiser a couple of years ago, we only had one editorial direction, and that is we could not mention Israel in any context.
Right, sure.
That's the only thing we heard from the BBC.
Does that surprise anybody watching this? Does it surprise anybody? I highly doubt it does. And I think people just need to cool their jets on this. And just sit back and say, hold on a minute, wait. Because what is happening here is exactly what the supporters of Israel want to happen. People are condemning each other who are on the same side. Look at this. This is George Galloway. This is an absolute superb piece, by the way. Everyone should read it. Again, F.U. Frankie Boyle. Frankie Boyle he's a supporter of Palestine. He sets up, he does gigs where the profits go to the Palestinians and Gaza. He does that, and this is George Galloway attacking him. We've got to let the facts come out here before we immediately start attacking people as anti-Semitic or not doing people any favours. We've got to do that, because otherwise we're doing exactly what the people who are supporting Israel and their crimes against Palestinians and Gazans, we're doing what they want. You cannot talk about Israel and their crimes against Gaza without the other side immediately jumping on the anti-Semitism train and immediately labelling you an anti-Semite. It's what they do. And we need to be able to say, right, okay, these things are separate. I'm sure that people who have been defending Gazans and Palestinians who are on their side, who don't like Israel, I'm sure some of them, I'm sure a good proportion of them are anti-Semitic. But that doesn't mean they all are. This is a tweet that I saw from somebody. I don't think much of comedians like Frankie Boyle and David Baddiel unfairly using anti-Semitism to attack Labour, given that Labour have a membership of 600,000 members and complaints of anti-Semitism against Labour about 70. Anti-Semitism in Labour is hardly rife. Correct. But it is still a problem. It does need to be talked about. However, we are falling into the trap by constantly talking about that when we should be talking about the crimes in Gaza. These things are separate. And it's the BBC that are doing the bidding of the Israeli lobby here by cutting out any sections of or any jokes that, any bad jokes that Frankie Boyle has done there, and I'm sure that they were very cutting because they usually are, and leaving in the one about the Ewoks. This is from the House of Commons, by the way. A report from 2016 to 2017. Despite significant press and public attention on the Labour Party and a number of revelations regarding inappropriate social media content, there exists no reliable empirical evidence to support the notion that there is a higher prevalence of anti-Semitic attitudes within the Labour Party than any other political party. And this is the problem. The news and the BBC are slanting it as if that is the real problem. And it's amazing to me that they get away with doing it. Chomsky said this: one must admire the incredible skills the media have in manipulating the population. They've managed to convince many that the most passionate anti-racist campaigner of the last 40 years, Jeremy Corbyn, is actually pro-racist and anti-Semitic. And that's the point. The media are skewing the conversation. This is what we need to highlight. And thankfully, Frankie Boyle, who has had a lot of criticism over this. Now, to be fair, the only criticism I would give of him is What did you expect from the BBC, Frankie? Surely you know this is going to happen. I've just shown you 2 interviews where you've been talking about their bias. You know they're going to do it. So why put your show on there? Yes, you're going to get a bigger audience, but it's not even on mainstream TV. It's on the iPlayer. I put it to him that he could make just as much money if he actually put the show out on YouTube and asked for, patronage for it, or did a website and promoted it through his millions of Twitter followers. He would probably make more money doing that, and he wouldn't be censored. But this is a tweet that he put out that sums it up perfectly. Somebody said to him, yeah, there are a lot of idiots out there. Frankie, why don't you quote the rest of your viewers who are not left-wing gammons? And called you on the fact that you chose to do a show about anti-Semitism instead of Gaza. And that is the point. That's what the majority of us are saying. But some of us who think that have been lured into this whole quagmire of an argument about anti-Semitism, when all we want to talk about is Israel's crimes about Gaza, within Gaza. And to be fair to Frankie, he said this, okay, happy to quote this sentiment. He's happy to say, yeah, okay, that is a fair criticism. Which happy to quote this sentiment, which I've had from literally hundreds of people, that anti-Semitism in Britain should not be discussed while Israel commits war crimes. The idea that Jewish people have collective responsibility for Israel is racist. Have a great day. And that is it. That's the point. And this is what's been lost by it all, with people coming out and saying, oh, I've deleted Frankie Boyle and I've deleted David Baddiel and there's an argument now and everybody's arguing on the left between us. We're all on the same side. This is exactly what they're trying to do. Exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to make us have a conversation about anti-Semitism instead of having the conversation about Israel's war crimes, and rather not war crimes, almost genocide in Palestine and Gaza. And that's the point, and that's the reason why I wanted to make this video. I know it's a comedy show, and I know it's gone on quite long, this video is, but it's so important that we make the distinction between anti-Semitism and crimes against humanity. And that's the point I wanted to make in the video. I hope I've covered everything. This is a real hot topic and a hot potato, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't quote I didn't say a couple of words so people can't attack me on the anti-Semitism angle. Because I know that the Israel lobby, they will come after me if you say anything bad against Israel and you get a high profile. Just look at Abby Martin's videos on Joe Rogan. Every video she's done on Joe Rogan, look at the downvotes. Look at the fact that they have a pack mentality that goes after anybody who is critical of Israel's crimes against the Palestinians in Gaza. And that is what we need to talk about. And the fact that the press, the BBC and the mainstream and the corporate media in this country spend more time talking about anti-Semitism in Labour when it's just as bad in the other parties is disgusting. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more, please subscribe and please click the bell down there so you get a notification of when I drop further videos. Otherwise, YouTube will hide the video from you. Yes, they have admitted that they do that. Also, we're facing an absolute onslaught in independent media from the establishment at the moment, including YouTube. I don't make any money from YouTube whatsoever. I rely totally on the audience for me to continue doing this. So if you can afford to send me $2, $3, $5, whatever it is that you can afford through Patreon, again, the link is down there, I will be eternally grateful, and it'll allow me to keep giving you the truth and cut through the propaganda and the BS that we get from the corporate and establishment media. If you can't afford to do it, please share the video as wide as you can. Talk to your friends and family about the issues that I and other channels on YouTube who are independent raise. Thanks very much for your support. We have to fight back against this. Till next time, peace and take care.